Camera. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to How Not to Burn Toast, take 2. So we recorded this earlier last week, and our computer decided it didn't want to actually let you hear anything we said. So we're recording it again. Yay!
We get to talk about it all over. So we have even more fun facts for you.
Right. So this episode is New Year, new food. So happy
21.
Whoa. 2021. There we go. Everyone, it's been an interesting start to the year. But we're here with some nutritional information and how to make good for you food taste good. Yeah. Because a lot of people make New Year's resolutions to eat healthier, lose weight, all that kind of fun stuff. Including, that was what my New Year's resolution was to try to get more green things into my diet besides, the green behind us.
Yeah.
And I find for a lot of people it's really hard to do, even as adults, because either you didn't grow up eating it and you fall back to your comfort meals, especially when it's not a great year.
Yeah.
Or you don't like certain tastes or textures and you're trying to find a way around them. So we're going to talk a little bit about nutrition, and we are not nutritionists, so we have lots of lovely links for you to go and check out. And we're going to talk about portion size and ways to make good for you food taste good.
Mm-hmm.
So first we're going to start with nutrition, and I actually brought stuff this time, so I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah.
So this right here is your nutritional panel. It has to be on all things that you eat, I believe, as required by
the FDA.
There we go.
Yeah.
And I think they've made changes over the last few years to them too, because a serving size like this, which is 14 fluid ounces, like with energy drinks or something, was always like 2.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would you give me a can that I can't seal? Like, I can seal this, but why? So the government went, you can't do that anymore, and now they have to consider 1 bottle of serving size. So it has all your information on here, and you probably can't read this. This is, I'm not going to say what it is.
But it's definitely a box that all of us are familiar with.
Right.
Whether you ignore that box or look at it from time to time.
Well, that one had the advertisement on this. But so if you are eating something, this is my thing. This is 1 serving. Oops, other way. This is 1 serving size. It says that it's 1 serving size. This tells you how much 1 serving size is. Yeah. So you have to maths. So 1 whole box is not a serving size, unfortunately. So like the calories seem really low, but when you start to figure out how many crackers this really is, which I think 27 crackers. It's not a lot.
There are like some people that count out how many crackers they're eating and stuff like that too. But I think part of this is to be like more conscious of, especially processed foods when you're eating them, like how many are in a serving. Whereas like I could eat a whole half box of Cheez-Its and be fine with that. But you want to like think about maybe how much you're actually intaking.
Like 12 serving sizes in this box. I don't think I've ever made this into 12 servings. But it does have a lot of information in here. And one thing that I had pointed out to me last year by my doctor is I need to watch the types of fat I'm eating. And apparently there are good fats and there are bad fats. And I brought this bottle because it has both on here. Saturated fats and transsaturated fats, right, are not very good for you, apparently. Those are your no-no fats. But polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat are good for you, and they help to lower your cholesterol and all that kind of fun stuff. So apparently those are the things that you should look for. And like I said, we have links. Read them. They're smarter than us.
Sam put together a really good guide of a whole bunch of different links about nutrition and these different tips that we're going to be presenting to you. And those guys are much more better experts than we are too. But I think something that you said about that and something that we talked about in the first part of this that we recorded is that your goal with food doesn't necessarily have to be like, I want to lose like 300 pounds this year and like be able to run 17 marathons in a row. But like you can like have goals of like, I want to lower my cholesterol, or I just want to eat more green things and stuff like that. And it's a lot more attainable that way, I think.
Right.
But something that we really want to advocate for too is that we have a giant collection of cookbooks in our library, and a lot of them are for people like maybe you want to eat better because you have colon cancer, or because you have high cholesterol or diabetes or anything else under the spectrum of health problems or health diseases. And we have a whole bunch of different cookbooks that can help you kind of find what you like to eat that's helpful for maybe your high cholesterol, and find new tasty recipes that maybe include more greens or something like that too.
Right, because you can sneak them in places. And like I have a niece. You've heard me talk about her. She is 3 years old, and that seems to be about the age when you get to be extremely picky.
Yeah.
So currently, right now, she will only eat chicken nuggets. Ellie, if you're watching this, eat your vegetables. Chicken nuggets are good, but vegetables are better. Not really, but I can't even say that with a straight face. But you'll notice that, I mean, when you watch TV, you'll see a lot of commercials for like chicken nuggets right now for kids that they're putting vegetables into them. So you can do this at home too. It's sometimes easier just to go out and buy them at that point. But I mean, there are alternatives. I mean, I love potatoes. I'm a Midwesterner. Potatoes, the bomb. Tater tots are like my favorite types of potatoes. But they make cauliflower ones now. They make broccoli. Sweet potato ones are really good too. Still pretty high in carbs, but they have other, nutrients that regular potatoes don't have. So there are alternatives out there to like your favorite foods that you can try. And I mean, I grew up in a family who, despite living in farm country, we ate a lot of the same things all the time. So now I have been looking for alternatives, especially with food allergies and cholesterol and wanting to lose weight. There are a lot of yummy, tasty ones out there, and we have a lot of cookbooks. We have a lot of cookbooks.
Yes.
And but the diet ones, not like when I say diet, I mean what you eat. A lot of times when we say diet, we're thinking of, oh, I have to eat less, or Atkins or something like that. But diet is, the term actually means what you eat. So not the whole losing weight thing. I mean, I hate that that's synonymous with that. We have a lot of books with specific diets in them for, all of that kind of stuff. And they're in a different area than our cookbooks normally.
Yes.
Because they're medical books versus just cookbooks. So if you need help when you're searching online or something, give us a call. We can find them pretty easily.
Yeah, we can always help you if you're looking for a very specific cookbook, like, hey, I have a brain tumor and I would like to eat to help get rid of it or something like that.
Right.
We can try and see if we have something like that, because Sam orders so many cookbooks every year.
I love cookbooks.
Great. But also like a new sneak peek of some of the newer cookbooks that she brought that also kind of talk about diets in a different way. There's a newer kind of movement going called intuitive eating, and that's more, it'll go into our like other topics that we have too, but it's more of like eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full, and listening to your body and kind of trying to just not overeat but not undereat at the same time, because that's not healthy for you either. And everybody deserves to have all 3 square meals and
right.
and
it also brings up the figuring out why you want to eat.
Yeah.
So I am someone who eats when I'm bored, emotional eater, kind of stuff like that. So I can catch myself. I may not feel stressed and anxious, but my body actually is, and the way it's telling me is, you need to eat that whole bag of potato chips, Sam. So it's also, hunger can also be an indicator of something else is wrong within you. So it's a good way to check in with yourself. So don't forget to check in with yourself.
Just a bit more mindful about
Right.
your different eating habits.
Yeah, I like chips very late at night, which is not supposedly good for you. So actually, she brought us to it was a great segue into the next thing, portion sizes. So, and I keep forgetting, I meant to bring in one of my dinner plates. One of my dinner plates at home, oops, sorry, I gotta go the other way, is like this big. It's supposed to be a 9-inch plate. I could beat someone over the head with it and kill them. It's so big and heavy. And I think a lot of us from a young age were trained to eat everything that's on your plate. I often heard, there are starving kids in the world. You need to eat everything that's in front of you.
Or that you're blessed enough to have food, so like you should eat the food that you have.
That's much nicer than what I was told apparently. But yeah, and while you know, that's also another mindful thing. Think of how much you're putting on your plate.
Yeah, that too.
Because I like to fill my plate. There should be no waste. It's not my plate. So use a smaller plate.
But also to think about the guilt of you don't have to eat everything you've put on your plate if you're full, if your body's telling yourself like, hey, I don't need any more food, I'm A-okay. I made a conference buddy, and we talked about this last time. I made a conference buddy a couple years ago that I went to lunch with when I was out of town on a conference, and she kind of talked about it in a way where like it is wasteful to leave food on your plate that you are not eating, because there are people who aren't as fortunate to have lots of food all the time. But also the food can be wasted inside your body as well, because it may make you feel lethargic, and that's counterintuitive to what you're doing as well. So
exactly. And when she said that, I was like, that's a really good way to look at it. I'd never thought about that before. And even if you leave food on your plate, normally you can always eat it later.
Yeah, especially leftovers, especially since all of us are eating at home anyway, and it's easy to just pop it in a container and you could save it for later.
You could actually look at one of our first episodes about freezer foods.
Yes.
And you can freeze a lot of things, because I know I have trouble making portions for like 1-2 person. It's hard. Most recipes are made for families, so I always have some kind of leftovers, especially when it's like soup or something and you make a pot enough to feed an army. Freeze it. Then when you're having a bad day or busy or something, or someone else is having a bad day, you can just hand it off.
Or you'll have it ready to pop in the microwave too.
Yeah. I do that quite often, because some days you just kind of get home and you're like, I don't want to cook and do dishes.
Yeah. So, or nothing in my fridge sounds good. Or something like that
Yeah,
too.
I have those days quite often.
Yeah.
So that's portion sizes, and there's I know it's changed a little bit from when I was younger, and they told you like a certain percentage of your plate should be each thing. So we put in some links to talk about like healthy plates and sizes, because I think the guideline for like lean meat, because that's what they say you should eat now, is, and this is great for Las Vegas, a deck of playing cards. So if you can imagine a deck, and then the rest should be all like a few carbs, complex carbs versus simple carbs. I can't really tell you the difference, so we'll put a link in there.
We have some links.
And then the healthy for you vegetables, especially those green ones that we don't like to eat very often. So take a look at the links. And then we also added in substitutes, and substitutes for 2 reasons. One is allergies, because a lot of us are finding out we have allergies or intolerances, and I know these fairly well because I have a mixture of both. Intolerances are
ice cream makes my tummy hurt.
Yes, digestive issues,
yeah,
primarily, where allergies trigger a histamine response in your body and can be extremely deadly. So, and you can have a mixture of both. I do. It's really weird.
Yeah, or eating peppers makes my face puff up.
Yeah.
That's not good.
That's me.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they can be different varying levels. But sometimes it's really hard to find substitutes, or you can't think of them off the top of your head. Like when I love cheese. I love all things dairy except for milk itself, because that one really does make me sick. But, you know, having a niece that has that dairy allergy my sister cooks totally different now. from the way we grew up. So she gave me a list because I want to cut down on dairy. That's one of the things I want to do is cut down on dairy in my diet. She gave me a list of all the different kind of things she used. And there's like substitutes for everything now. Some are good, some are not. Like with butter. Butter's a big thing a lot of us use. We use it in cooking, we use it in baking, we spread it on toast. So you use a lot more of it. I think we all realize. I know I do. So there's always actually been a substitute for butter. It was called margarine when I was younger, and that's what I grew up actually eating. Now they have the fancier types. She highly recommended, I think it's called Earth Balance.
Oh, I've heard those are really good.
Yeah, and they actually, because margarine never tasted like butter. It was not butter. It's not even close. But these get close to the flavors you're expecting. And I think that's a problem a lot of people who gain allergies later in life. You're trying to find something that exactly tastes like that thing.
Yeah.
There is no cheese substitute that is going to taste like cheese. I'm just going to tell you that. So you're going to have to differ your expectations, I think, is that. So don't expect faux cheese to taste exactly like cheese. Don't expect faux meats to taste exactly like meats. They get really close, but your brain will still probably go, huh, it's missing something. So, but there are a lot of substitutes out there, and actually my recipes were pretty much all about substitutes. Because like I said, I like potatoes a lot. And I also like meat a lot. So, I mean, Midwesterner, meat, potatoes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite dishes is, and it's a casserole dish, which is why I love it. You can just shove it all in one pan and put it in the oven. And yeah, it's shepherd's pie, but we don't actually make shepherd's pie when we do. Sorry, we just had coworker coming. We don't actually make shepherd's pie in the United States. We normally make what would be called cottage pie because we tend to use ground beef versus ground lamb or mutton. And in this case, I use lentils. And lentils are a really good source of proteins. They're beans. So most people have issues with beans.
Well, they're very fibrous too.
They're
so
very
they're good for your digestive system.
And yeah, you get some excess gas, but they're really tasty, and they are a really good substitute for like ground meats. No, they don't taste exactly like them, but they're tasty in their own way.
Very tasty. We've even talked about making curry in the past too. Both of us have kind of a love for curries, for the what is it called?
Japanese curry?
The Japanese curry, but the curry roux. But if you make a pot of lentils and it has the additional water in it, if you add curry roux to it and put that over rice with maybe stir-fried vegetables or steamed broccoli, that's delicious as well.
Yeah, and super simple too.
Yeah.
So with this one that you'll see, I use lentils in the place of ground beef. I call it a refrigerator casserole because I put in whatever vegetables and frozen vegetables I have on hand. And then instead of mashed potatoes, and this is going to sound crazy, I use cauliflower. Cauliflower works actually really well as a substitute for mashed potatoes, especially when you put in a whole head of roasted garlic, which is what I did, because it adds a flavor that you're looking for to cauliflower. And I didn't use any dairy in the mashed potatoes either, or the mashed cauliflower, excuse me, the mashed cauliflower either. So that even matches it up a little bit more, because normally with potatoes, what you're really tasting is all the fun stuff that you put in there, like butter and sour cream and cheese. So sad.
All of that fun stuff.
So give this a try. I actually even made these mashed cauliflower. They're synonymous now in my mind apparently. Recently, and what I did was I think it's called col common. It's an Irish dish where it has mashed potatoes and you normally put some kind of green in it. And I took my mashed cauliflower recipe and put sauteed, I think it's called dinosaur kale. It's the
Oh, that
flat
would be
one instead of
yummy.
the curly one. It was so good.
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't like greens at all, and I really like that. So you could even put that on top if you really want to.
Yeah.
And then my next recipe will be dessert, because we all need a little dessert right now. And it's a mousse chocolate pie. And I have to admit that it's not fully mousse this time. I bought what I thought was just regular instant coffee at Trader Joe's. Apparently, it already has cream and sugar in
Oh,
it. It's fancy.
that's weird.
But it's a really good recipe. It doesn't use any dairy, and you're like, how can you make a chocolate pie without dairy, Sam? Tofu. I know, sounds really weird, super tasty. I had tricked many of people into eating this and them not realize that there's silken tofu in there because it's kind of like a pudding.
Yep.
High in protein, good for you. Chocolate. But those are my two recipes, and you'll see a video of those. And then Kayley has a really cool one too. We don't have a video for it, but she can talk about it. It sounds really yummy.
Yes, my recipe that I included on the PDF that Sam is going to link in this video is a sweet potato and quinoa bowl, kind of like a burrito bowl, but not rice and beans. It's quinoa with a whole bunch of vegetables, so it's really simple. I did forget to put in seasoning in the recipe, but you can add any kind of seasoning that you like. Austin found like a vegetable rub that he's been putting on chicken lately from Marshall's, and it's delicious. So I put that on this. But it is a red onion, a red bell pepper, and a sweet potato that you saute, and then you put it over quinoa, and then you add a scoop of Greek yogurt and some Parmesan cheese, and it is awesome.
It really, and I think you could probably substitute the quinoa for other types of grains too,
if you don't like quinoa.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a very versatile recipe.
And like quinoa was like very popular, I want to say like in the 2015
a couple years ago.
And like it may seem kind of intimidating because you can cook it on the stove, kind of like how you can cook rice on a stove, but you can also put it in your rice cooker as well.
Ooh, that's a good idea, because I've tried making it before and I did not do well.
Yeah, you cook it on your brown rice setting instead of the white rice setting. But I think kind of the thing that Sam has been talking about with her recipes too is even if you don't have dairy allergies or different allergies to food, you can substitute other things in for, like, say you have, we got off, but so say you have like a craving for potato chips. You could make popcorn instead, and that's a snack that's really high in fiber. If you don't add butter to it, if you don't use microwavable popcorn, like if you have an air popper or a whirly pop, you can control the amount of like salt and oil that is on your popcorn. And then that can help you with your digestion and everything too, because it's really high in fiber.
Right.
Or like you can substitute all kinds of things. Like say you don't like dark leafy greens. Red leaf lettuce is technically a dark leafy green, but it still tastes like romaine. So we eat a lot of red leaf lettuce in our house because I do like kale, but not all the time. So you can like raw. Find these different kind of workarounds to see how you can adjust your diet and adjust the things that you're eating too.
And speaking of popcorn, because I have a whirly pop at home, there are different varieties of popcorn out there.
Whirly pop for life.
Right. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
And my favorite I found is an heirloom variety that's purple.
Oh, that's cool.
And it has a really, it has its own flavor, which a lot of the popcorn that I think we eat as Americans is white, which white doesn't seem to have a lot of flavor. But this one has like a nutty flavor to it, a little sweet. And I just make it with olive oil and salt. And I actually throw my salt in the whirly pop as it's popping.
That's a smart idea.
And then it coats it all. Because otherwise you get like some with salt and some without, and it's very sad.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe like you have a baby New Year's resolution of not eating like as many chips this year or something like that. If you substitute with popcorn, and maybe like one night you want to have a special like movie night, you could still put butter on your whirly pop popcorn, but only every once in a while. My mom put butter on popcorn last night, and it was like so decadent.
Right.
I never put anything on popcorn.
Right.
And she like, it was a treat.
And that's what it ends up being, is you get to treat yourself.
Yeah.
Now. And like speaking of potato chips, I eat taro. That's how
how you say it in general.
Like the root vegetable chips.
Yeah.
Yeah. those are
I
so
think we
good.
might say taro a lot, but it should be taro, I think. And you can buy them. Who is it?
Trader Joe's has some.
Trader Joe's has some.
Whole Foods.
Whole Foods. I bought a whole big giant box of them on Amazon because they're really expensive and hard to get at Whole Foods.
I think the only grocery store that has them reasonable is Trader Joe's.
Yeah. And I eat those. They're higher in proteins. They have other vitamins and stuff in them that potatoes don't have, and they're tastier.
Yeah.
To be real honest. So look for different types of like vegetable chips.
Yeah.
My niece likes vegetable straws. So there are a lot of things out there that you can try.
Yeah, and with like the root vegetable chips, they're normally cut a little thicker, so they're almost more substantial for you to eat instead of like eating through a whole bag of potato chips and not feeling full at all.
Right.
Like those can kind of like bulk up, like help your stomach to feel full and stuff like
Right. I still want to eat a whole bag of them though, because they're tasty.
Yeah.
So that is our new year, new food. Finally, our computer has only tried to destroy it twice now. But next month is February, and we all know what February means. Chocolate. I mean,
So we're gonna talk about chocolate now that we've wanted to be healthy.
so we're gonna talk about decadent date nights made easy, because I know a lot of us won't be in a place. Either we feel we shouldn't go out, which please stay safe and healthy, folks.
Get that vaccine, everybody.
Right. And or things aren't open right now. So we're gonna do a few recipes to show you how you can make your date night special at home.
Yes, and there are a lot of easy recipes to make for a date night at home too. That is a little bit more special than just like every night, weeknight meals, but something to do that may like give you something to look forward to this February.
Maybe a few aphrodisiacs in there. Probably not oysters. But chocolate, I think I'll try to get some chocolate at least in one of mine, because
some like little lava cakes or something.
Actually, that's
That'd
exactly what I
fun.
was thinking. I have a great recipe for molten lava cakes, and they're so good.
I feel like that's always really popular around Valentine's Day. People retweet that all the time.
I mean, it's cake and cake batter, basically. So you get 2 for 1, guys. So we'll see you in February, hopefully on time this time, Mr. Computer. And we'll be there with some date night.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, let us know what you liked about Sam's recipes, and let us know what you might substitute in your daily diet or your daily eating routine that you have been inspired to do because of the new year.
Yay!
Yeah,
So we'll see you later.
Bye, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new year. We're going to start off 2021 with dessert. And you're thinking, hey, Sam, that's not healthy. I thought we were going to learn how to cook healthy. We are. We're going to make a healthier version of what most people would consider chocolate silk pie. Now, this is an Elton Brown recipe. If you haven't watched Good Eats, you should. That's where I learned to do a lot of my cooking that I didn't learn just from doing or from like my grandma's. So we're going to make, it's called a mouless chocolate pie. And I have to confess, it's not going to be totally mouless, because when I was buying my instant coffee the other day, I didn't realize this was instant coffee with milk and sugar in it, for those who just want to put their packet of coffee in and go. So not quite mouless chocolate pie. It is really easy to make it dairy free, but you're like, hey, so how are you going to get that nice creaminess that you get? This. And you're like, oh my God, what is that gelatinous stuff? This is tofu. It is silken tofu. It's extremely soft. You can see when I put my finger in it. It's kind of like a set pudding. And it is absolutely flavorless like most tofu. But it is chock full of proteins and low in calories in comparison to, say, heavy cream, which is what you would normally use. So we're going to use that. We're also going to use chocolate. Now, if you need to fully be dairy-free, you need to make sure you buy dairy-free chocolate. This is dark chocolate, actually 2 different kinds in here. Semi-sweet is good for this also too, but make sure if you need to be dairy-free, that is the fancy dairy-free chocolate, because sometimes dairy can sneak in, you know, with coffee. Now, the recipe normally calls for coffee liqueur, but I don't have any, and it also makes it less child friendly, and I have snuck this to children before. It is a good way to get them to eat protein. So I just use coffee normally, and it is 1/3 cup of coffee. Now this is fully loaded coffee, so it's kind of not correct, but I'm gonna pour about 1/3 cup of this coffee in and make a mess while I'm doing it. And then I'm gonna melt the rest of this chocolate in the microwave. Yes, the recipe says use a double boiler. I do not do that because my microwave is much faster. You just want to microwave it on 30-second increments and stir it after each one until it melts. So while I'm doing that, I'm gonna wipe up my slight mess right here. So here's the crust. I'm cheating and using an Oreo crust, and that's what you should use anyway. Oreos are dairy-free. I know, it seems surprising. What is that stuff that's in the center? But they are actually dairy-free. So these are also made, I checked on the label, they don't have any dairy in them. But you can make your own. There's a recipe on there. It says to use butter, and it's a mouleless pie, so I don't quite understand that. But you can use either an oil like coconut oil, or you could use margarine or a non-dairy butter. Apparently the non-dairy butters are pretty good. So I'm going to check my chocolate now because I don't want it to burn. We've all seen those cooking shows where people burn their chocolate because they stick it in the microwave for like 5 minutes. If you're using chips, it doesn't take that long to actually do it. Normally less than 1.5 minutes. Especially if you're like me and you just poured hot coffee on. So while that's nuking, we're going to go over to our handy dandy blender. You can make this in a food processor or a blender. I'm using my big fancy Ninja blender because it's easy to clean. And I'm just going to put the tofu in here. Make sure you drain it first, otherwise you're going to add a lot of liquid in. And I know, I'm like, it looks really gross, but believe me, it's really tasty. I have tricked many of people into thinking this was, you know, a full-fat silk pie. And in all reality, they were eating tofu, which they had all said they hated. I'm not a huge fan of it either, but mix it with chocolate, you're good. Now, you can't use any other kind of tofu. You're like, oh, well, I have firm tofu in my fridge already. Yeah, that won't work. I have tried that. It does not work at all. And now my chocolate is mostly melted. I'm just stirring it up. I'm actually going to add a little bit more coffee in here because I did not measure correctly. Make it a little bit smoother. It also uses vanilla, just a teaspoon or so of it. And for a sweetener, because you notice I haven't put any sugar in there, it uses honey. Now, if you're like me and you don't use honey that often, your honey may be crystallized. If your honey is crystallized, just stick it in the microwave for a little while and it will soften back up. I mean, archaeologists have eaten like 3,000-year-old honey. Yeah, it's pretty much indestructible. Go bees. So you notice I'm putting this all in the chocolate. It's just so that I can mix all my liquids together before I stick it in. And I'm going to add one more thing in here that is not in the recipe, I don't believe. And that's just a pinch of salt. And you're like, Sam, why would you put in a pinch of salt? Well, salt, just like coffee, enhances the flavor of chocolate. It makes it taste more chocolatey, which sounds really weird, but it does. Believe me, there's a lot of science behind it, dealing with, well, your saliva and electrical charges and all of that kind of fun stuff. We'll just go with it. It makes things taste better. So there we go. I'm gonna lick that bowl later. So now we come to the fun part. Blend it. Now this is a really powerful blender, so it's gonna be probably pretty loud. So sorry about that. Okay. Ooh. Ta-da! Kind of looks like pudding, doesn't it? So the reason I use a blender is because if you use something that's not quite as powerful, it sometimes separates, and that's really gross, to be real honest. I'm just making sure I don't have any big chunks of tofu in there. I'm gonna actually blend it just a little bit more. There we go. Woo! That pulse really worked. I'm gonna get this stuff off the top because we need all of it. And the great thing about this blender is I can just fill it up with hot water and soap and blend it, and it cleans itself. Really nice. So now we're gonna take my big crap off and move my blender out of the way and bring over our pie shell. And you just dump it in there. Smooth it out. And there you go. You're like, nice and chocolatey. Can't even tell there's tofu in there. In fact, it's a little bitter because I use dark chocolate. So if you don't like really dark chocolate, please use a semi-sweet. But I like dark chocolate. Now, this needs to sit for at least 4 hours. So I like to make it the night before. And the other reason I like these pies, because they come with these little tops, and you just stick it on here, and it keeps the pie all nice and safe. Now you can serve this with a whipped cream, non-dairy, or if you don't care about the dairy, you can make a whipped cream. Sweeten it a little bit, and you could also make that technically in the blender too. But that's your pie. I'm gonna stick this in the fridge for, well, probably overnight, because I like leaving them overnight. And then we will take a look at it tomorrow. And in the meantime, I'm going to get our next recipe ready. And we're going to be making a comfort food that Americans may not be as familiar with, but those who have any Brit in them might be. We're going to make a lentil shepherd's pie. So we'll be back in a bit. Okay, we're back, and we're starting our lentil shepherd's pie. Now, shepherd's pie is a very classic dish from the UK. It is a casserole, and underneath, because most casseroles have some kind of top, underneath is kind of like a stew of ground meat, normally lamb or mutton if it's called shepherd's pie. If it's cottage pie, it's ground beef. The kind of sauce, it's kind of like a chicken pot pie for us Americans. So a gravy and then some vegetables in it, carrots, peas, things, onions, things like that. And then it's all topped with mashed potatoes, stuck in the oven and baked. It's really tasty, let me tell you. I made it last year for Christmas, actually. But we want to make it a little bit healthier because there is a lot of fat in that. So we're going to start out with our topper, actually, and we're going to make a mashed cauliflower. And most recipes you'll see for mashed cauliflower tell you to and this always bothers me, boil it. Do not boil cauliflower. For once, it's got a lot of sulfur in it, so it's like cabbage, and it makes your house smell like farts. And number two, you're not adding any flavor to it normally, because people just boil in water or salted water if you're lucky. And so you're taking all that flavor out. You're also taking out a lot of nutrients. So what I like to do is roast mine. And it's really easy. This is 2 small heads of cauliflower. And I just put some olive oil on it, some salt and pepper, and there's my salt. Give it a little toss in there to kind of coat everyone with some oil, because brown is flavor. And then I stick it in a 375, 400 degree oven for normally about 20 minutes, or until it's brown and soft. And this makes a really good faux mashed potato. If you don't like mashed potatoes, give this a try. If you do like mashed potatoes, also give this a try. Because it really does kind of have the same texture. It doesn't obviously have the same flavor. Flavor for things like potatoes and cauliflower a lot of times depend on what you're putting in them. So we'll actually flavor these up so you really can't tell the difference, or your mouth won't miss those mashed potatoes as much. So we're going to put these in the oven and let them roast off. And then we'll start our lentil pie. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our lentil shepherd's pie. And it's actually fairly simple. I like to call it a refrigerator pie, or refrigerator casserole, because you can put a ton of different stuff inside of it and kind of clean out your fridge. But we're gonna start out with the basics of pretty much all of my cooking: onions and garlic. So we're gonna saute those with some olive oil. And this was a really potent onion. I actually teared up when I was chopping it. So this is just 1 medium onion chopped up. And I always tend to use a little bit more of the aromatics than is called for in a lot of recipes, because it's flavor, and I like to have a lot of flavor in my food. This is the first time I've used a cast iron pan on this, so I was just checking to make sure it works. If you notice, I'm using a cast iron enamel pan, and the reason I'm doing that is because I can stick this directly into the oven. So for me, this is going to be basically kind of a one pot kind of meal, and I like those because less dishes to clean. And I love you can tell I've used it a lot. It's been through the ringer. This is just, and I guess I'm calling them out, this is a Lodge. They make a lot of the cast iron that you see in the United States, and I have this is a 10-inch skillet. I have a 13-inch skillet too, and that's bigger than this burner, so we're not going to use that one today. We're just going to let the onions saute a little bit first before adding the garlic in, because garlic burns very quickly. You just want these slightly softened because they're still going to cook some more. with the other ingredients, and you have some hard ingredients coming in, so you don't want them too cooked. Then I'm going to add in my garlic. Yeah, garlic. And as soon as I got that mixed in, I'm going to add in the harder vegetables. Carrots. You're like, oh my god, Sam, your carrots are purple. Yes, they are. I like my food colorful, and I like purple carrots. They taste exactly the same. And because carrots are hard vegetables, they do take a little bit longer to cook up. So we're going to let those saute off for a few minutes. And then we're going to add in our mushrooms. And I've just quartered these mushrooms because I still like to. Oops, something else snuck in there. That's for a little bit later. I like to taste my mushroom. If you don't like mushrooms, you can leave them out. And we may end up needing a bigger casserole pan. I have a tendency to add a lot of stuff into my cooking. And I'm also going to throw in a couple of bunches of thyme. And you notice I left them in bunches because thyme is a pain to pick off the leaves. And I can just take these out when I am done. But it adds a really nice flavor. So now we're just going to let this saute for a little while until all the vegetables are soft. Okay, so now we're going to add in the rest of the story. So I'm adding in stuff from my freezer, actually. Peas and those other green things that look like lima beans. They are edamame. They're very tasty. And then we're going to add in some flour, because we need to make a roux. What's a roux? A roux is basically a flour fat mixture that helps to thicken things. So now we're going to, oops, sometimes I make a mess when I stir. Now we're going to cook the flour a little, help it mix in there with the fat. And as liquid hits this, it's going to thicken up. So now we're going to add our lentils. And now the lentils I started a little bit earlier because they need to cook a little bit. It's just a cup of lentils to 3 cups of stock. And then I boiled it for, well, simmered it for about, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And what we're going to do is add the rest of the seasonings in. And that's some more broth. Normally you'd add wine. I do not like wine, so I don't ever have any in my house. So what I'm gonna do, because wine's acidic, so that's what you're really looking for, is add stock and then add a little bit of balsamic vinegar. My dogs wanted to be in on that, apparently. So I'm gonna stir that a little. We may need to add a little bit more stock because you kind of want this to be wet, because it's still going to cook some more. So I'm going to add a little bit more stock in there. And this is just regular vegetable stock. Nothing fancy. Then I'm going to start, as I find it, taking out the thyme. so that I don't accidentally leave it in there and someone gets a mouthful of what tastes like pine leaves. And then I'm going to add another seasoning. This is Worcestershire sauce. If you're vegetarian, you can find vegetarian versions of that, or you can leave it out. I think it just adds a nice meaty flavor. It's also a little salty, so you notice I haven't added any salt or pepper, the classical seasonings yet. That's because I want to taste it first and see how it's going. So a little taste. Could use some salt because there's one in there. And some pepper. And I'm going to stir it. Turn it down and let it simmer for a little while off to the side while we work on the topping. So if you remember correctly, I'm using roasted cauliflower instead of mashed potatoes. So let's get out my blender again. It's getting a lot of use today. It rarely gets this kind of use because it's so big. And then I'm gonna get in the oven and get out my roasted cauliflower. Just gonna set it down here for a second. This into this is nice and golden brown. That's flavor right there. Now my secret ingredient is and it's really hot, so I gotta be careful. It is roasted garlic. Just came out of the oven, so gotta figure out a way to handle it. Now, roasting garlic's really easy. It's about, you take a bulb, cut off the top. You can kind of see that right there. And then you put some olive oil in it, wrap it in foil, and roast it for about an hour on 400 degrees. And then you get this luscious, almost buttery, Swedish, I don't know, best garlic ever. I'm just gonna squeeze as much as I can out of it without burning my hands off and into my lovely mash. Now you will need some liquid to loosen this. I'm just gonna use some of my leftover vegetable stock and then blitz it. And you start lower. you notice your blender's having a little bit of trouble, you may need to add more liquid. Whew, sorry. Cauliflower has a lot of liquid in it, but still. Okay, so now I'm gonna taste this. Cauliflower's a little sweeter than potatoes too. Really good. I could just sit there and eat that. I'm gonna add my salt and pepper finally. And give it another quick blitz. And there we go. Mashed cauliflower. Well, you get it. So I'm going to take this off into a bowl. Go. Sometimes this comes out a little bit hard. This is actually more of a cauliflower puree. You can, if you want it thicker, you can put other root vegetables in it, like potatoes. One or two potatoes will help it thicken a little. You can use rutabaga, which I love personally. Trying to get all the goodness out. And then we're going to go back over to our I'm going to give it another stir just to make sure everything's good. And now we're going to top it. And we're going to top it with this. Now when I make this with mashed potatoes, a lot of times I put Parmesan cheese and all that kind of fun dairy stuff in it. If you want that cheesy flavor, you can get something called nutritional yeast. It's what they use like a lot of times on cheesy popcorns. And that will give you that cheese flavor without the dairy if you're looking for no dairy. If not, go ahead and put some dairy in there. Just not too much. So there is the almost finished pie. Now we're going to bake this in the oven for about 20 minutes, 400 degrees, and then we will be ready to eat.